Warning! This is for entertainment purposes only. Do not take this seriously. This is not medical advice. Although I'm a doctor, I'm not your doctor yet. If you want me to be your doctor, click the link in the description box. But otherwise, this is just for fun, kids. Don't do this at home. You're watching Dr. Todd Lee TV, where theoretically you could learn a bunch of cool shit. Greetings, Earthlings! Like, subscribe, and share this video. Share with a friend. Share with enemies. Share with people who think they know everything. Spread it like herpes. It doesn't matter to me. Also, speaking of herpes, I am a medical doctor, and I could be your doctor. That only requires you to click the link in the description box. I can order you blood work. I can read the blood work. I can treat any illnesses. Basically, it's like an HRT clinic that's a one-man army. Also, I do coaching. Dr. Karina Dodson and I have a coaching business called Apex Coaching. So if you sign up with me, you get coaching, which is nutrition, programming, competition prep, or lifestyle coaching, as well as all the medical stuff. So you have 3 people, 2 doctors in one business. It's going to be the contest prep, the nutritionist, the programming person, and the doctor all in one. You can't beat it. It's integrated. It works the best that way. You'll love it. Make sure to do it. Click the link in the description box. Hello. You suffered through that bullshit and you're still here. That makes you the top 50%. 50% of people can't make it through that shit. I'm trying to make it less boring. I'm not doing a very good job, though. I'm sure of it. There's not very many things I do know how to do. One thing I do know how to do is train back. Oh, boy. Oh, I thought I knew everything. I thought I was the shiznit. I was doing the Dorian Yates thing, and boy, did I get strong. And I had this really big right half of my back and a really tiny left half of my back. So looks good in pictures. Probably looks good in this thumbnail. But it wasn't exactly what was appropriate for longevity. So I had lower back pumps like forever, and it sucked ass. And lower back pain, had hip issues, all because of the way I was training. So I'm going to teach you some secrets that I wish I knew 20 years ago. Hopefully you watched part 1, how to grow legs. That explains the basic premise of how to grow. So part 1 was how to grow and how to grow legs. This is just how to grow back. This will not help you except for choosing the right exercises. When it comes, you're like, I already know how to lift weights. But if you are someone who's the slightest bit open-minded and might think that a pro bodybuilder who's a doctor might know something you don't, check out the first video. It's an amalgamation of what I learned through J3 University, Renaissance periodization, and a bunch of other smarty pants motherfuckers. This is going to be just exercise selection. Okay. So if we're back, because of how fatiguing back is, both locally and systemically, mostly systemically, like legs is extremely systemically fatiguing. We want higher SFR movements, not high raw stimulus magnitude movements. If you don't know what those terms mean, you got to go watch the first video. I'm not going to repeat myself. It's fucking awful. You're like, you son of a bitch. It's just like, well, if you knew what SFR was, stimulus to fatigue ratio, or if you spoke English, you'd be able to figure it out. So because growing the back as a priority is so fucking hard because it requires so much fatigue, if you were going to prioritize back, you pretty much can't prioritize anything else. My dumbass is prioritizing quads, hams, and back, and biceps and triceps right now, which basically means I'm just maintenance voluming chest and delts and glutes and calves. But if I was smart and I only had one thing to bring up, it's like, oh man, all I have is one thing to bring up. It's my lats. I would prioritize lats, and I would put lats first, and I would hit them twice. So I would go pull, push, legs, off, pull, push, legs, off. And on the leg days, I would put a hip hinge that involved my lats, like keeping the bar close to your knees on a Romanian deadlift one day for glutes, and keeping my glute and doing straight leg deadlifts on the other day. So I'm hitting my lats, I'm hitting my back 4 times in 8 days that way. Not a lot of volume, but you're getting the thickness hard on those days. So I'd prioritize a vertical lat pull on pull 1 and pull 2. Now, there's a vertical lat pull underhand single arm, or you could do double arm. Now, if you watch my elbow path, you'll see my elbow path is going away from my body. We want things to come into the body. You'll notice that a lot of the experts are doing stuff on this Nautilus pull down machine. Joe Bennett, Justin Shire, JP, Kassam from N1, and N1 is a great resource. Luke Miller, who does my programming, basically vertical pull down. If you notice my arms vertical, I am not straight up and down. I'm at an angle because I have to be able to avoid that lat. So from the side, it looks like this. Now, if I'm leaning back, this is straight. But if I'm going to arch my back, I can kind of get it too. But if I keep my core braced, I'm going to be basically straight up and down. This is about as much as I can go. If I do this, I'm basically pulling my scapula back. And now it's an upper back movement. So this is all you're going to get from a vertical pull. So you have to be seating away from the cable, which none of the cables are set up like that. That's why these machines are better. A lot of the machines have a 45-degree angle pull, which I find works much better for the lat. It's less tension in the stretch position. This is more tension in the stretch position. Tension, stretch position. If you lift your arm up and it starts to internally rotate at a certain point, that's out of the lat range of motion. This may be your arm's range of motion, but this is your lats range of motion. So that doesn't mean you shouldn't do a full range of motion movement. Even Kassam does that. If you notice, there's some arc to it. I'm still getting a good stretch on the lat, and I'm still getting a good contraction at the bottom. From the side, I don't know if it's going to be useful from the side. But to truly measure the lat range of motion, that's all this is. So vertical lat underhand pull down, you can use a cable, you can use a machine. My favorite is a Panada machine that I found in Northville Powerhouse. My favorite angled one is when your hand is in a semi-supinated position, the Panada, or what I do, and I'm going to have a short released with this video, maybe the day after, where I'm going to do it the day before, just because I'm like that. I'm nice. So I'll do the short before, where it shows me using a hammer strength high row that with the supinated, with the pronated grip, the 45-degree angle pronated, semi-pronated grip, but I'm using a D handle and I'm supinating. So I'm forcibly externally rotating and then pulling into it, bracing with this hand. And it works fantastic. That is my favorite way of hitting the lat. And that is a very high SFR because I get very low fatigue. I get a ton of stimulus in the lower lat. The lower lat, where the lat, some people say the ischial fibers, but basically the lower lat is very hard to hit. And that is the best way to hit it, is with either the underhand pull down single arm or the row. Now, as far as double arm, an underhand or semi-supinated, if my hand doesn't fully supinate. Girls and smaller men can do that. They can fully supinate their arms, and their arms can come straight up and down like this. But as you grow lats and triceps, you don't really do that anymore. You come like this, which doesn't really, it's all upper back. So to do this, you basically have to lean back a little bit, and you have to stick your chest up like you're doing a pull down, but you're really sticking your chest up towards the bar. That's what's really going to hit the lats. It still won't get as low at the very tippy bottom of the lat as the single arm will, because you're not leaning over to do it. Remember, you can lean over too far and engage your obliques. You got to really listen to your body. Do really high reps so you get a good mind muscle connection with that lower lat, get a really good pump. After a few weeks, you'll have a better mind muscle connection when you use heavier weights. But I strongly suggest starting with sets of 15 to 20 and working your way up from there. I didn't mention progressive resistance last video, but basically, whether you're taking your sets to failure or if you're going reps in reserve, you still want to progressive resist. So you want to add 1 rep or 2% to the load every single workout to at least the first set. And that guarantees that every workout's harder than the last time, so that there's progressive resistance. Simply, that's progressive resistance in a nutshell. So not at the expense of form, not at the expense of tempo, not at the expense of mind-muscle connection. So the quality stays the same. Assuming you have a 10 out of 10 quality, you can then titrate up on quantity, whether it's a rep or it's a load. And sometimes if you're not sore, your local fatigue is so low, you can handle more volume, you can add a set. But sets are very fatiguing. You'd only want to add 1 set per body part per week. And remember, the sets are cumulative. So if you add sets to your legs, you might hit total systemic fatigue and you might have to deload just because you're so sore. You're not sore anywhere, but you're so run down, you're going to get a cold. As you can see, I'm basically dealing with some phlegm issue. I don't know if it's this new COVID outbreak or if it's just I ran myself into the ground from 8 or 9 weeks of reps RIR 0 on every set, and work in trying to grow the quads, the hamstrings, the back, and the bis and tris at the same time, which you're not supposed to do. You're supposed to pick 1 big body part, 1 small body part. That's it. So that is lats. There's also horizontal row. The horizontal row, in my opinion, does not hit the lats as well as the verticals. So consolidate, basically do 1 45-degree angle, 1 pull day, and 1 vertical pull another day. Ideally, you're going to want to go supinated so you can really keep that arm close to the body like Dorian. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do an underhanded pull-up to conserve time, but single arms do hit better. So there's that. The underhand rows that are good are the Dorian row, the hammer strength Dorian row. I like the pin loaded one more than the plate loaded one. The plate loaded one is too much of a stretch. My arms aren't long enough to use it. What I found was that the plate loaded hammer strength rows have a the force, the tension on the handle changes as it goes through its range of motion. Ideally, you want it to be heavier in the stretch position, lighter in the contracted position, because you're stronger in the stretch position and weaker in the contracted position. The pin-loaded hammer strength machines are continuous tension. So it's very hard to lock them out or to complete the rep, making them not as good. That's that. Now we're on to upper back. So upper back is a combination of your middle back, which is your rhomboids. That's what pulls your scapula together and depresses them, and your traps and your rear delts. So a lot of people they'll have a vertical pull, a horizontal pull, which is a row. Then they'll have some shrugs. They'll have some rear delts. They might have a deadlift. That's a lot of shit, and you're basically redundant as fuck. Like, rather than doing 3 sets of rear delts and 3 sets of shrugs, just do 3 sets of upper back row. So if you do this on a T-bar with your hands high, that's going to get a lot of upper trap and a lot of rear delts and some middle trap. If you arc your back, you'll get a little bit of rhomboids. If your hands are lower, you'll get more rhomboids and you'll get some upper lats. You'll get less upper traps, but you'll get just as much rear delts. This feels rear delty, but this is just as much rear delts. So you're going to get rear delts with all of your rows. You're going to get traps with all your rows. You're going to get rhomboids with all your rows. So really, if you're doing an underhanded low row to get your lats finished off from a horizontal direction, then you do a 45-degree angle. I'm referring to the humerus. The humerus is a 45-degree angle, and it's a pronated grip or a semi-pronated grip. You'll get some rhomboids and rear delts. Then if you're doing a fully pronated grip and it's up to above your nipples or even to your nipples, you can get your traps, and you can also angle like this, an upright row. You're going to get your middle delts, rear delts, and traps that way. Just do those. You really don't need to target your lats, I mean your trap specifically. You don't have to target your rear delt specifically. Yes, it's a combination movement. Yes, you are not isolating it, but you will still overload it more with the compounds, and you're killing so many birds with one stone. So if you have really shitty upper traps, then do your rows and then throw in shrugs. If you have really shitty rear delts, then do rear delts. But if you're doing rear delts and traps, you should just be combining them and just doing more rows. Simple. See, I'm trying to make this simple as fuck. So pull one, you're going to do one, either a vertical or 45-degree angle pull, and you're going to do a row, either a 45-degree angle row or a higher row or an upright row. The other one, do the other one. So you want to make sure, like, in theory, you don't want to double up too much on, like, a 45-degree angle row would be good to pair with the upright row, and the vertical row would be good to pair with this 45-degree angle row, because then you're getting your whole back. Otherwise, you might be missing the middle if you do the upright row and the underhand pull down. And if you did the 45-degree angle here and the 45-degree angle here, you're getting your middle back and upper lats twice as good. So you kind of want to go zone 1, zone 2 one day, zone 2 and zone 3 the other day. That's a good way of doing it. And then, like I said, you would put your hip hinges on your leg day, because you're prioritizing back that month. If you're prioritizing legs, you wouldn't put your hip hinges on your leg days. You'd put your hip hinge, one hip hinge on one of your back days. So you're getting hamstrings and extra time, as I mentioned in the previous thing. So where you put your hip hinge, whether it's a leg day or a back day, prioritizes the opposite. So by putting your hip hinge on a leg day, you're prioritizing your back because you're getting an extra back day. If you put your hip hinge on your back, you're prioritizing your hamstrings because you're getting an extra hamstring day. And you get to shuttle most of the fatigue for that body part onto a different day than it's even being trained. So your back recovers way better without that hip hinge on it, because the hip hinge is grueling. The only thing that's as hard as a hip hinge is a squat. And some people like me, I prefer to squat to hip hinge. I think hip hinges are harder. My squat was like 450 for 10 or for 6 or 8 in a Smith. I think I got 435 for 6 free weights. Whereas my conventional deadlift, I had like 455 for like 1. So most people if they can squat 400, they can deadlift 500. With me, I could deadlift 400 for 5, or I could squat 400 for 10. Like, that's how much stronger I am at squatting than deadlifting. Now, if I did like a Smith rack pull, Romanian style, then I could do like 495 or whatever. But the point is, based on my anatomy, doing a conventional deadlift was hard as fuck. So I personally do straight legs right now for hamstrings, and they're on my leg day. And because my priorities this month are really just back and legs. So where I put it, it's still going to be the wrong answer. So, but for you, if you're prioritizing back, put the hip hinge on the leg day and make sure you're engaging your lats first. I mean, I would have to shoot a video just instructing you, but there's other people that have this that's done very well. Good. Kuba Celian has really good instructional stuff on how to do. Luke Miller, JP, Justin Shire, Joe Bennett, John Jewett, in no particular order. They all basically, I don't want to say they all teach the same stuff, but they are all expert executors of the modern way of training. Kassam is a very scholastic N1. The guy is Kassam, a very scholastic way of approaching it. Joe Bennett's a very humorous way. John Jewett's in between. Luke Miller's an expert. And then there's the British contingent where JP is kind of the source, and then Kuba is a disciple of that. I don't know if he'll like that term. I don't know, whatever. I'm just trying to compliment the person, but you can't always do a good job complimenting people. So all these guys are expert deadlifters, even though they're not professional power lifters. They're experts at bodybuilding deadlifting. So because which is the deadlift that hits the back the best? I would say the conventional or the rack pull is going to be, because you're low, you're not focusing so much at the bottom. Well, it's the lower back is mostly the conventional. Your traps and middle back for stabilizing that much weight in a rack pull. But if you're rack pulling above the knees, it's kind of a waste of your time. You might as well just do below the knee rack pulls. And at that point, it's the same thing as doing a stiff leg deadlift off of blocks. So what's the difference between a rack pull or a stiff leg off a block or a hex bar deadlift? We're splitting hairs here. So whichever one you feel in the right location. So a trap bar deadlift, it's probably going to hit traps better. Lower back and hamstrings, a straight leg deadlift. Romanian deadlift is going to hit your glutes better. Conventional deadlift really isn't optimal for bodybuilding. All the other deadlifts work better. If you want to handle the maximum load, then you're going to do a rack pull. And some people might argue with this. That's fine. Fucking light it up in the comment section. I'm not going to die on a hill of deadlifting. I don't give a fuck. That's like talking about what's the best way to fuck an ugly girl. It's like, I don't really care. You fuck all the ugly girls you want. You can have them. I would rather not even deadlift if I didn't have to, because to me, it's just too exhausting. The fatigue is way too high for the amount of stimulus. There's every exercise is better for the hamstring, the lower back, the glute, or for the lats than the deadlift. The only advantage of the deadlift is that it spreads the force out over so many body parts that if you have shit hamstrings and shit glutes and shit back, then it's worth it. But if you have a shitty legs but great back, or shitty back but great legs, you don't want to fuck around with the hip hinges. Maybe a little bit, maybe 1 or 2 sets a week, just so you have total body strength, because it communicates power from the upper body to the lower body to make you strong. And being strong isn't useful in bodybuilding, but it is in other aspects of life, like not getting hurt, picking up weights and loading a leg press sled, throwing children through the air. Why you do that? I mean, I don't know. Hopefully there's a pool nearby. But there's that. So I went over everything, rear delts. If we were going to isolate the rear delts, we want to protract and then push out to the side. That's protract and push out to the side. I see motherfuckers doing this all the time. They're doing their rear delts like they're a row. And don't do that. You don't use your whole fucking upper back. If you're trying to use your upper back to get more weight when you do rear delts, don't do them straight armed. Just do a machine that's a chest supported machine and a high bar row. Don't do this and try to get your whole back involved in this rear delt movement. Just pull. You'll be able to use twice as much fucking weight. You won't feel it in your joints. You'll feel it in the muscles better. This straight arm shit sucks. It's kind of like a weapon of last resort, because you have to use such light weight to avoid feeling pain in your elbow, or you're having your tricep get involved, or feel pain in your shoulder. It's a finesse movement, but it's not ideal. God, this is 23 fucking minutes. All right. Shrugs. A lot of people do weird shit with their shoulders when they shrug. Fuck all that. What you do is, when you're doing a chest supported row, finish your set with these things called kelso shrugs, where you just do a shrug. This is upper traps. This is middle traps. Protract, retract, protract. So I'm not bending at the elbows. I'm not pulling it in. I'm literally just, so you're starting to notice, like, wait a minute. So what you're saying is a rear delt fly is nothing but a shitty upper back row. And a shrug is nothing more than if this is a row and then a shrug is this, then a shrug is nothing more than a shitty row. And that thus, if you need to work your traps and your rear delts, just do the rows. Don't isolate one or the other, because they both need the work. Yes, that's what I'm saying. So the same thing you do for your row, you just do it with a straight arm for trice, for rear delts. The same thing you do for a row, you just do for shrugs. You just don't move at the shoulder. So you don't move at the elbow. You keep your elbow locked for rear delts. You keep your shoulder locked for shrugs. You bend at both shoulder and elbow to get both traps and rear delts, and thus a high row is going to almost always be better than one or the other. This is something I think I learned from JP. Jordan Peters, for those of you who don't know who JP is. He didn't teach it to me directly. I just watch motherfuckers' videos a lot. Smart people. I'm good enough to know who's smart and to pay attention, and then I follow through and try things out. And then I'm familiar with Brad Schoenfeld's scientific work and with Eric Helms's scientific work, and I read that stuff. So no, they don't teach this shit in medical school. So no, my medical degree doesn't apply, nor does my biochemistry degree, nor do my other degrees. But my IFBB Pro thing makes experience is worth everything. It's just you learn if you'd ever been involved in the job market. The degree just means you know how to do work, show up, and complete assignments, that you're moderately competent and can follow through for an extended period of time. So thus you're hireable. Whether you know what you're doing is based exclusively on experience. So being a doctor, I can read fancy medical studies and make sense of them. But whether or not we learn any of this shit in medical school, the answer is no. So that covers everything, I think. Obviously, biceps should get their own video with triceps and be like, that's a stupid bearing, but trust me, really, when you're pulling like this in a pronated position, you're getting mostly brachioradialis and brachialis. You're getting almost no bicep involvement. Watch my bicep. See how you can see it firing just from the supination? If you're not pulling in a supinated fashion, you're not using bicep. The other thing is, if you're pulling like this, there's the moment arm is shit between the joint and the, basically, if you put them like this, like if you ever see some people do their rows and their hands so far away from their elbow, we've created a moment arm. The line of force is here, right? We've created a moment arm this distance between the line of force and the elbow. That moment arm makes the bicep involved. So a lot of people do their rows like this and they get a lot of biceps. You'll see girls who are untrained, they'll have huge traps and huge biceps if they use steroids, but they won't have any lats. It's because they pull like this, because they don't really have any idea how to lift. They're not pulling like this with their lats. So they're pulling like this. So they're getting a lot of biceps. They're shrugging it up, and they're creating a big moment arm for that elbow. So the biceps are doing a lot of the pulling work. We don't want to do that. We want to use straps so our forearms can get involved. So the biceps and the forearms have to be trained completely separately. You don't want to train them. You don't want to consider them trained by back. A lot of people will throw them at the end of back, and that works, but they should still get their own prioritization, even on a back priority principle. All right. I guess I ran over. I was supposed to do this in like 10 minutes. It came out as 30 minutes. Hopefully you guys liked it. So far we've covered the total basics of hypertrophy, like tempo, range of motion, and all that shit in episode 1. It's really important. You really should watch it. I mean, it took me 30 years to learn it. And then that was also covered all of legs, from the calves all the way up to the, I didn't cover glutes, but men don't train glutes, women do. I'll do a separate glute video because it's going to be female focused. And then when it comes to, and I will be differentiating between a quad way of doing a press and a glute way of doing the press in that video, so that the girls know why not to do what men do. And then if a man did want to prioritize glutes, they could just do what I tell girls to do if they want to have a glute prioritization, but I've never heard of a guy doing that. Or they could just non-prioritize quads on and do more hybridization pressing. But I'm getting way ahead of myself. And then today we covered back, we covered hip hinges, we covered lats, covered rhomboid training, covered trap training, covered rear delt training. And we're not isolating these muscles. They all work as a unit all the time on everything you do. It's just prioritization. It's like a lat dominant row versus a rhomboid dominant row versus a trap dominant row versus a rear delt isolation, which is just a shit row, versus a shrug, which is just a shit row. Yeah, that's basically it. I've repeated myself enough times. I'm sure you're fucking sick of it. If you want my help with programming, go to the link in the description box, click the consult, and we will talk. I am actually really good at this. A lot of people think, oh, all he knows is gear because he's a doctor. Motherfuckers, I was lifting a long time before I went to medical school. And I spent way more time in the gym than I spent anywhere else in my life. I'm way better at lifting weights than I am at fucking being a doctor. And so training is way more important to me than gear. Gear is pretty fucking simple. You go test, primo, GH, insulin. You're done. Or you're cutting. You go test, masteron, tren, T3 possibly, and clen. You're done. L-carnitine for everyone. Telmisartan is probably a must. There you go. That's everything you need to know about anabolic pharmacology. All right. Till next time. Toodles.